and welcome to Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Well, hello. So lovely to see you again. I'm very excited about our new series.
Yes, no, we're up and running, and we have so many amazing guests this season. And one of them is someone who featured, I think, in our first season, and that is the wonderful friend and colleague, writer, everything person, John Tomsett.
Hello, great to be here, you two. Lovely.
Yeah, so in case anyone's thinking like you just invite your mates, the truth is, well, we that isn't the reason we've invited you on. And we're pretty brutal about rejecting people who ask to come on our show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in fact, this morning someone asked, and I just said, sorry, you've kind of just killed your opportunity, because we wait for people to do stuff and get things going and make things happen, and then we say, oh wow, look at that's what's happening, let's invite that person because look at what they're up to. And that's what you've been doing. You have been just immensely productive, and you've written 2 books, not just one, and we want to talk to you all about it because it's such a fantastic
Right.
So look, John, I'm going to show mine up. Emma doesn't have hers to show, but this
Right, there's the primary one.
Yeah, look at it. Yeah, fantastic.
In my best Ukrainian color scheme. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, well, it's as a friend of ours said, it looks like the cover was designed on Word by a GCSE media student or something, which was a bit rude.
So it's not IKEA. It's also IKEA's colours as well. So
Is it? Yeah, it's IKEA. It's all sorts of things. But it is what it says on the tin.
It is, and it takes the title from your blog and some of your other books. This much I know, which is like, associate you've done that lots of ways.
Definitely.
This much I know about truly great primary teachers or truly great secondary teachers, and brackets, and what we can learn from them, which is interesting. So, tell us about it, John. Tell us about what you've been up to and how you.
There's a huge story to it, and that story comes full circle in a couple of weeks when I go to Research Ed in London to talk about the books. So a year ago, I was at Research Ed London, and Rob Coe was doing a talk with Raj Gandhi, I think his name is, and they were talking about the project they're doing, and it was advertised as Moneyball for education. Now, if you know the film Moneyball, you'll know it's about the Oakland A's, which was a baseball team, which was a terrible team, and they got a statistician in to look at finding a single data point to judge the quality of the people they were signing. And they went from being a rubbish team to being a brilliant team using this methodology. So I went to this talk with Rob speaking, and Raj was speaking, and they were talking about, can we find a specific data point to judge the quality of teachers? And they're doing this project for the National Institute of Teaching, and it's in Raj's trust. They've got 12 secondary schools, and every pupil has a test at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and every teacher gets an average progress mark for all their children they've taught that year, from year 7 to year 13. So what they're advertising it as, and they definitely were, they were talking about using that data point to judge the quality of teachers, and they were talking about actually recruiting based on your data point. And so, Tom, if you were a plus 0.4 of a grade teacher, and I was a plus 0.3 grade of a teacher, just to point you, it's really easy. Your kids make more progress than mine did. So we're in there, and there were some grand fromages in the room, right? There were some big cheeses around. Sam Sims was in the room, Becky Allen was in the room, Rob, obviously, Raj. And I just gently put my hand up and said, I've literally, as a head for 18 years in a big secondary school, and a senior leader for 30 years, I've literally interviewed hundreds of people, maybe even 1,000 odd people for jobs. And this is what I said. I said, look, there are some where you shake their hand in the morning, look them in the eye, and think, yeah, you'll do. And there are some that I took along to the. I would put my arm around at the end of the day and say, don't go into teaching. It will be hellish. You'll hate it. And I got booed. I got properly booed. And Rob said, oh, we'll just forget all our research and all we'll do is rely on the John Tomsett infallible interview method for recruiting people. And they all started laughing and taking the piss out of me. It's fine. And so Rob and I had a coffee afterwards before we went on to look at a final session. And I said, Rob, a 4-year project to get a single data point. I said, surely over 4 years, there's something, opportunity cost is something else you could do. And he said, like what? He said, I get what you're saying, but like what? What should we do? And I said, well, let me have a think. So that was the Saturday, I think it's the 6th of September. Sunday the 7th, I wrote a blog. Tuesday, I wrote a blog about judging great teachers. And by Tuesday lunchtime, I'd got the book deal. And I'd said that I think we should go, I'm going to go and watch as many good teachers as I can find and see what they do and see what commonalities they have and actually go and see them. And so I spent, so 29th of September, I still hadn't made any visits. I did my first visit on the 4th of October to a school in Cambridge, to see a teacher in Cambridge. And the publisher, Crown House, gave me till January the 6th to write the book, right? So I ended up writing 2 books, and I met the deadline at 4 o'clock on January the 6th. So I wrote 177,000 words. While I'm doing all that work for, with walkthroughs and other talks and stuff. And every time I'm alone in a Premier Inn on an evening, I'm loving it because I'm just cracking on with this book. And even up to the last week of term, I did a talk over in Manchester in penultimate week of term. And at the end of it, the head of a research school, Phil, over in Stockport, said, I've got a brilliant teacher, Megan Bull. I'd love you to come and see her for your new book. And I said, I'm done, right? I've got a deadline. It's the middle of December. I went home and I thought, actually, maybe I should go and see Megan. So in the last week of term before Christmas, on the Wednesday, I went and saw Megan Bull, year 2 teacher over in Stockport, and she
was the first.
She was the last one. So by then December, she was the last one.
Right. Okay.
Right, and then
jump in a minute because I feel like, I mean, so we don't want to spend much time or any time talking about this data point thing because you're not.
No.
But it does sound like, well, I'd need a lot of persuading about that. But it is interesting though that it's almost like, so because what I'm fascinated by is that it's more or less you've written a book more or less about the John Tomsett sort of assessment of what makes a great teacher in a way, but you haven't just based it on your own assessment, have you? So the people you went to see weren't just your selection, were they? They weren't just
no.
You randomly picked. So let's get into some of that. Like I won't talk about some specific people, but I'm really interested in your process of, this idea of a truly great teacher, and your criteria. How did you?
And I because people ask me, what do you mean by a truly great teacher? And I said, well, nothing special. People who do the day job day in, day out, who are going to be cracking on with it, who on a wet Thursday afternoon in November, in the furthest reaches of your school, are still going to be doing the business. And I kind of a shorthand for it, Tom, was, if you'll know what it's like. You have hundreds of people visit your school every year as a head. And it's the teachers you take them to, because you could be certain there would be good things going on in the classroom, right? If I put it like that, the ones who you are absolutely certain who were deeply conscientious, will be doing the work, and children will be learning lots and lots. So I kind of said that, and I've work I've done over the last 4 years and over 33 years. Gave me lots of good contacts with people and people I trusted to do recommendations. So like Chris McGrain up in Glasgow, Mark McCourt had recommended him for one of the hub books with Mary Meyer. And I knew he was I knew he was great, so I gave him a call and went and saw him up in Glasgow. I've been doing lots of work with a trust in Birmingham, and I knew I could rely on their recommendations, the colleagues there that I know. And then I I've been to a special school in North London, and I got a brilliant special school teacher, but I knew the head there, Lee, I trusted his recommendations. My old deputy recommended the person down in Cambridge. So I got around to see lots of different people, and some I knew were good because I'd worked with them, but most of them were recommendations from people I trusted.
Yeah, I mean, and then you seek to capture them. And I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, there isn't a thing in each person in the secondary book anyway. There's a thing at the end where you have a sort of data section, sort of saying a kind of like a backup. I'd be really interested to know what the difference was, or what sorts of single data point scores those people got. That could be weird if there's a
Yeah.
difference, isn't it, between your evaluation and other people's recommendations of what a truly great teacher is, and then their kind of technical progress scores didn't match that.
Well,
That'd be
so the first one I went to see, Susie Marston, who's a drama teacher down in Cambridge. And her data is unbelievable. So for people who know about P8 scores or don't know about P8 scores, that's the progress score for secondary. And what that means is if from beginning of year 7 to the end of year 11, if they make a progress score of 0, it means the student has made the expected progress they would make based on Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 4. Based on the Key Stage 2 SATs results, you'd expect them to get this result at GCSE. So if you get a 0, they've made exactly the progress you'd expect. So Susie Marston, over 10 years, her average is plus 2.8 of a grade on average per student. That's nearly 3 grades higher than expectations. So if their expectation was a B, they were getting an A star. And that's sustained over 10 years, right? That's not a blip. So what began to develop, and there are different measures, aren't there? And if you a Key Stage 2 teacher, that's hard to measure what that looks like, etc., etc. But what measures you could get, what it showed was that Rob and I are both right in a way, because what it looks like is that if you look at I'm really interested in the behaviors and attitudes that lead to good progress. So that golden thread, that really unbelievably impossible golden thread to try and track. But if you're showing these as a teacher, showing these behaviors and attitudes, your children will be making good progress. And if your children are making good progress, it's more than likely you'll be showing these attitudes and behaviors. There's two
Yeah.
sides, in a way, two sides of the same coin.
Let's
And
come
when
to let's
go
come
on.
to the kind of collection, the kind of the conclusions at the end. I think we'll work up to that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I'm interested in anyway, we could just talk about that, but we want to talk about some of the people. But Emma, let me bring you in now at this point. Like, what's as a reader, what is your take on the books?
I really like the fact that the data was at the end, because we all know that learning is linear either. So it's a bit of I wouldn't say a nonsense, but especially with younger children, especially where there are no data collection points, like across key stages, then you can't really use the data meaningfully. So actually, kind of the litmus test a lot of the time is, yes, are these teachers using effective practices that we know that are effective, that have been measured in other kind of research? But a lot of the time when I'm watching what I think is a really great teacher, my litmus test is, would I want my child in this class? Does it feel like somewhere that this child would be encouraged, nurtured, listened to, challenged, pushed? And from reading some of the kind of vignettes and the case studies, you can really see that come across in where there's an extract in the primary one where there's a child who doesn't want to respond to the teacher for whatever reason. And John narrates how the teacher deals with that child. Now, we don't know why that child didn't want to particularly take part in that class discussion, but it was the care and the precision and the thought and the dignity of the way that that teacher dealt with that child that lifts it. It's one thing to be a great practitioner. It's another one to be a great effective practitioner who deploys lots of effective techniques alongside understanding children and young people and understanding the associated motivations. So I was really pleased that that data point came at the end, and the focus was actually on what is the teacher doing to show professional wisdom, but in terms of the techniques they're using, but also a genuine care for that child, because that's the kind of classroom that I would want my own children to be in. One where the teacher is obviously informed and experienced and, you know, well versed in how to teach, but also the how to work with young people is often the bit that isn't talked about. And so that reductive process of that Moneyball approach really bothers me, because it's not about necessarily being a clinical technician. It's a, you know, teaching is an apprenticeship and being human. So that really jumped out off the page for me, John.
It's so interesting you say that. I mean, and I you know, as Rob brilliantly frames this, writing the forward to the book. So, you know, I don't believe in the kind of binary nature of stuff. You know, Rob's intro is just a great kind of analysis of how damn difficult it is to measure the quality of teaching, right? And there aren't many people who know more about that kind of technical stuff. But it's what Tom and Matt and I and people and you and people who work, Emma, with walkthroughs talks about, which is situational assessment, right? Have I got my radar on at that moment around the room? Am I seeing what's going on? And that example you quote was just so brilliant, and the teacher dealt with it so well and made sure that the child felt confident enough the next time round to give an answer. But it was only because of the teacher's skill that allowed that. And without that situational assessment and the humanity of her approach, that was the only reason that happened. And I think what came through, and what I'm really proud about in the books, is the humanity that comes through. That this is a human process. It's a messy human process. And you know, I have my annual row with Tom Bennett about how important those positive working relationships are. But you read all 19 of those primary and secondary kind of vignettes of the teachers, and every single one of them says the first thing I need to sort out is a positive working relationship with the children. That's the most important thing. That's the basis for everything else I do. They're brilliantly trained, but that's what they begin with, and then they build from there. So yeah, that's a really great observation.
I think it's interesting how, in a way, I mean, I feel that the way that you think of yourself as a teacher, and therefore what you report to someone, isn't always exact. It sometimes isn't exactly the same thing as what you're doing. So, for example, someone who's very skillful maths teacher who knows how to teach maths like a genius might feel that the first thing they do is establish relationships, but actually it's because they can just go straight in and nail the maths, and they don't need to think in that way. They're thinking, I need to do this, but in fact, they're someone else would see it as the relationships actually emerge out of that, and that comes through a few of them. In fact, what I was going to stop and pause a minute and let people know kind of a bit about the structure of the book, because for every person that you meet, they have the same flow. And you know, if I just sort of take the first one as an example, you have this lovely interview with them. Like you talk about why they were picked, but you just have a lovely in real life interview. So someone tells you about them first, so you've got this sort of like tee up, and then you go to this interview. Well, I in real life you call it. And it's great. I love the exchange, because what's great about that is that you have this really great way of like empathizing with teachers. You know how teachers work, and you just draw things out of them. Why are you a teacher? Why are you still going? And it's fair to say that most of them are sort of very experienced teachers, long serving. So they've got this sort of repertoire of like stories, and the fact that they're still teaching is to be celebrated. And they're so honest. Get them to just sort of like tell you stuff. So there's that. And then you get into a kind of, there's a bit of data and so on, but there's also, not literally all of them, but students uh, and other people's testimonials. And I love that. So you've got this sense of them being seen and around. You've seen them, they're talking about themselves, and other people are talking about them. So, but they get to sort of talk about themselves in a way which I feel is kind of lovely.
Well, it's a real celebration of teachers
Yeah.
because very near the end of the process, the publisher, John Crownhouse, said, should we call it This Much I Know About Truly Great Teaching, not Truly Great Teachers? And I said, look, the book's about teachers. If you call it Truly Great Teaching, it's just John Tomsett pontificating again, and people are sick of that, right? What it's about is these teachers and actually drawing out from them what they do by watching them, by talking. I think the other bit that really comes through strongly, Tom, and surprised me is my conversations with the children. Right, I think that was 100 times more illuminating than I thought it would be, because they really knew their stuff. Right, and one of the things I talk about in the conclusion is just how much they mimic you. They mimic you behaviorally. And I didn't realize how much that happened. And they're really explicit about it. And a few weeks later, after I'd written the book, I was doing some work on walkthroughs, and the books were done. This was back in May. And I walked into a year 6 class, and they'd got a supply teacher in. And you know where year 6 are after SATs. And the bloke was leaning back in his chair like this. He was almost falling out the chair as he was just clicking the slides as it went forward very nonchalantly. And you could see the kids slide down in their chairs in exactly the same way. They were just mimicking him. And they mimic you completely. They know who the lead swingers are, right? They know the teachers who don't quite care. They know the teachers who don't put it in. And they absolutely, every single one of them said, we work hard because Mr. So-and-so works hard and we don't want to let them down, or Miss So-and-so works hard, so you want to let them down. They put so much effort into what they're doing. And they were implicitly saying, we know they care about us, so we care about them. It was fascinating.
And it's so, go on then.
It's really interesting as well that a lot of the children talked about how the teachers made them feel. So it was, especially with the primary one, they talked about how the teacher believed in them or motivated them or challenged them or made them, want to work hard. And it just really highlighted the fact that, especially for small children as well, the bulk of their waking hours are with that adult a lot of the time. So the relationship that the primary children have with that teacher is absolutely essential. And it doesn't surprise me at all about the mirroring, John, because when I work with ECTs, I often say your class are a mirror of yourself. They will mirror exactly what you do and how you think about things and the attitudes you put over and the ideas that you put forward and your body language and your effort. They will mirror straight back at you what you're doing. But the bit where when the children were talking, very few of them were saying, my teacher gets me to get really good grades, or my teacher gets me, they were saying, makes me feel like I can do it, makes me motivated, makes me feel challenged, makes me feel like I can do great things, makes me feel like I can do hard things. So it just again brought home that thing that, yes, you can be a really great technical teacher, but unless you make children feel like they can do things and want to be there, that motivation part is so integral to what.
Yeah, it is. And I loved it. There was a lovely one down in Peterborough, and this lad was really funny, and he was really kind of very droll. And he said, my dad was very pleased when I got Miss Jamil for maths. I said, you're good at maths, are you? And he said, pretty much an expert. It was so brilliant.
I love it. Kids are so good.
I loved it.
I want to read a couple of things from just a couple of, to give you people a flavour. So this is from Chris McGrain, and actually I think I messaged you as soon as I read this. I just was going, oh my God, Chris McGrain, he's just amazing, maths teacher. And I just love this little bit of interview. So it says something like, John saying, you seem relentless about what matters and what doesn't matter, and you ignore the stuff that doesn't really matter. And he says, yes. That's his answer. And you laugh and you say, I saw your clock earlier. I thought, he doesn't give a damn that the clock's not right because it really doesn't matter. It's a great metaphor for your approach. And he just says, yeah, I'm sure my colleagues will say the same. Some of them sweat the small stuff and I don't. I just block it out and focus on what matters, and that's the kids. So he sweats kind of different stuff. And you say the children know that, which is interesting because they can say that, you see that he's bothered. And this is the bit I liked. He says, that's nice. Yesterday summed it up for me. The rest of senior management were teasing me. You'll be all stressed out with the vaccinations happening next week. The nurses are always grumpy. I said, I'm not too bothered. It's inconsequential to me whether the nurses are grumpy or not. Then I heard the student teacher in maths had asked, how many times does 48 divide into 4 as opposed to 4 into 48? I felt my heart rate go up about 10 beats.
Exactly.
That upset me.
Exactly.
Didn't give a damn about the nurses and the vaccinations, but the teacher getting the maths thing the upside down, he's like, no, that can't be happening.
It's so brilliant, and his office is just a complete mess. Yeah, he spoke to my heart because my first piece of writing I ever did that my mom kept was called My Shabby Bedroom. I've always lived in a mess, so seeing Chris, I lived it, and Chris was really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because he did stuff that would drive me mad, right? So one of the things we talk about a lot, and if you've ever watched Tom present on walkthroughs, you know that thing where you say, "Everybody got that okay? Hands up if you got that right. Everybody all right?" And Chris went round this. He did a starter in maths, and it's equivalent of year 12 in England. So it's the first year of hires, and a class of 30, first thing in the morning. And I'm quite good at maths. I got a decent grade at A level of maths. I didn't even understand the starter, right? It looked really impossible. And he went round and he said he went through the answer really quickly. You have to really concentrate. And he said, hands up, you got that right. And I'm thinking that's just a terrible practice. Because if I was there, I'd be going, yeah, I got it right. And I reflected as the lesson went on why he does that, where it was practice I would criticize normally. And I said to him, I tell you what, I thought about what you did, and the reason you could ask that question, it's just a big overall check, was because you knew exactly who could get it right and who couldn't, and they daren't lie to you because you know them inside out. He said, yeah, you're absolutely right. He said, my biggest piece of advice to everybody is teach between the desks, right? Be in amongst the desks all the time. And he was just relentlessly roving around, looking over shoulders. And the other thing he did, because it was period one, a lad's there in the corner eating his bagel, right? And I'm there as a head teacher going, he's eating his breakfast. And Chris says, what you got in your bagel? Said, cream cheese. Well, that's a bit boring. Anyway, let's carry on with the maths. Because he doesn't sweat the small stuff. He's not bothered about the small stuff. He says, as long as the lad's doing maths, I don't care. He can
You
eat
see,
as many bagels as he wants.
this is always the thing when you have to, when you were in a school, and I've had this experience multiple times with teachers who are amazing. And sometimes they don't they don't follow some of those things. And you just think it's sort of, but because if they transcend that somehow, it kind of doesn't matter. But of course, as a policy and all of that, you could say it's undermining other people and you get into that. But there's so much to think about. And for him, like you want to, if you were his head teacher, you'd be saying, just keep doing what you're doing.
Which his head teacher does say. She says that completely. She
Yeah.
says she's in the maths department. And she says, I like to feel I'm the best teacher of maths in this school, but I'm not. Chris is, right? And he's just amazing. If you get the chance to go and watch Chris McGrain,
Yeah.
Holyrood School, 2,200 kids, biggest school in Scotland, and he's head of maths. He's now acting deputy. Amazing.
And you say this about him at the end, you say, what strikes me is just how simple Chris makes it all look. Nothing flash, just deeply thought through teaching. His assessment radar is switched on permanently, which is about this teaching between the desks, like he's assessing in small stages all the time. He says it's like, he says it in a sort of tweet he copies in. Resist the urge to sit at your desk, talk to every pupil in every lesson, be interested in their work, provide feedback and encouragement. It's like that sense of being on it in the stuff that matters all the time. And that does have a sort of behavior management aspect of it. You know, you just, anyway, I just think it's just a lovely thing. And you don't get that type of anecdotal complexity, that those vignettes, when you average out through data, you get, it's not real enough.
I worked so hard on making the lesson come to life in the writing. You know, I was scribbling relentlessly in the lesson, and then really, what part of these two books have set aside my love of writing narrative, right? Because they're stories of people essentially, and I've really enjoyed doing that. And then the other piece of writing I think is probably one of the best pieces of across both books is my conversation with the 5 4-year-olds in early years, which is absolutely stunning. And one of the funny things I felt about it was every time I spoke to the children, I said, look, I'm writing a book about your teacher, and they got really excited, and they want to be in the book. Can we be in the book? And all this kind of stuff. 5 4-year-olds, I'm writing a teacher, right? So the early years teacher is called Mrs. Digger. You couldn't make it up as a name, right? Mrs. Digger. And I said, what's great about Mrs. Digger? Nothing, completely blank. And I say, okay, what makes her a great teacher? And Oscar says, I had 2 birthdays before I was 3. Okay, that's helpful. Complete randomness of teaching early years. It's unbelievable. Emily says, I must remember to take home my party invitations. Okay.
Welcome to early years.
What's that about? We finally worked out that Mrs. Digger is a truly great teacher because they get chocolate in forest school. Obviously, you know, if I got chocolate in forest school, I'd love that. But they also were really great. And then right at the end, Emily leans across and says, I've just farted. Okay. And then they start playing this game. Who can reach furthest across the table? And I'm redundant, right? My time is done. And what was great about them was they were really confident. You know, if you're thinking about how you measure progress, and you know, they could talk with me about all the words they've learned. They read them off the wall, but mostly it was that confidence they could sit with a stranger on their own, and just talk and be comfortable.
And if you multiply that out, you've got 4 of them. In in an EYFS class, you're probably going to have 25 to 30.
It was 30 in Helen's class.
And so if when you then look at the complexity and the deep, rich pedagogy that actually goes on in being able to direct those children who want to lean across the table and tell you that they've done unspeakable things, when actually you've managed to get those children engrossed in learning, in being independent, in getting on in happy and harmonious little groups and teams, and you think about how do you do that? Just it looks so easy from the
It's so skillful. It's so skillful.
So skillful, because when you take the children out of that environment with that really, really skilled and experienced EYFS practitioner and try and talk to them, that's when you get, I need to take my party invitation. So there is such a deep skill in eliciting information and maintaining focus with young children on things. But I was just thinking about the complexity as well, because it made me laugh that very early on in the book, you start talking to this teacher and she's not only running the classroom, there's also a dog in there. It's like, it's just adding another layer of things to control. I'm not only controlling and working with a group of young children, there's a dog in here. And then as I read through, there were dogs, there were sensory rooms, there were libraries, there were this, there were that, there were conversations that meandered across topics and subjects and areas, all knitted together in these meaningful conversations, but all rich and deeply complex, but done with such intention and with such clarity.
I mean, Nicola over in Lance. So Nicola's is English year 5, primary 6 in Northern Ireland. Something very special about her. So brilliant, so pure, and the children are so clear about her, about why she's so great. And she, you know, in terms of teaching maths, and teaching implication and how to read for implication, just brilliant. I've never seen it done so well. And that's what I love about it. It's little corners of our islands where brilliant teaching is going on. And I managed to get to Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, and Jersey all in 1 week. Right? It was just amazing traveling around to meet these people, and they're beautiful, just beautiful stuff. It is a complete privilege.
And there was a quote from one of the teachers, one of the children, and he said, when we go to university, we'll get a job, we'll look back at what Mrs. taught us and we'll know how to do stuff. One of the real tragedies of primary is that nobody remembers who taught you to do the really early stuff. Because by the time you're kind of 16 or 18, you are going to university, you don't go, do you know what? I really need to go back and thank my year 1 teacher. That phonics has served me well.
And I think they say about Nicola, about her maths. We do hard maths, but she teaches us easy methods, isn't there? There's so much beneath that.
Oh wow, that's great! I love it, making it seem easy when it's not. It's interesting. I feel like the students' take on it is good, and one of the things I think a book like this does, and I hope that people use it in this way, is it's a celebration of being a teacher. It should be something which you can sustain for a career, and we all know there are way too many people leave teaching too early, and I mean we've all been in teaching long time, and 25 years plus, and between us we've probably taught as zillion lessons, and it's sort of. I think you can think about your own reasons. Why did you keep going for so long? And it is this thing of the combination of the intellectual interest in the material and the process of teaching it, plus the fact that it's with the people that you're teaching it to, and it's this. And you can get into the whole organizational stuff, but all of that comes through in this book. That the teachers all have this in common, that it's not a choice. It's not one or the other. They love their subjects. They love talking about the material, but they also love the fact that they're doing it with the young people in front of them. And this is what they say. This is one of the examples. Jacqueline Bream, I think she's an English teacher, that you interviewed some of her A-level students at the end. And I just folded this down straight away a page because I just thought it's what they say is just amazing. They talk about how here's a couple of quotes. There's a genuine connection. She loves what she does, to get the best out of it. I'm getting some bad. I don't know why. I don't know if everyone else can mute, because I feel like I'm getting bad feedback when I'm talking. It must be me. Can we try that? There's a genuine connection with her and she loves what she does. She wants to get the best out of everyone. She is never mean. You never feel any negativity from her. You just want to be taught by Miss Bream. So that's just lovely. Like that sense that she wants the best from you. And then you go on, they say other nice things about her. You say, what about her teaching? And this is brilliant. You're not in the classroom to be taught. You're there to learn. It's an interesting distinction that Emma makes. I push her further. Well, it's not just an ordinary lesson. There's no copying off the board. All the lessons are interactive. There's no sitting in silence. Any idea you have should be positive about and then develop it so you feel you have made a great contribution. She gives practical advice and we have great debates. It's not just Miss Bream at the front telling us things. And then another one says, she forms such good connections and she is clear about what she expects. These are my expectations of you, and you are reaching this level at the moment, and you need to be here instead. In the end, we want to please her. That's one of the reasons we work so hard. I love all that. It's so passionate from them about her, and you just think, that's fostered.
I think there's a whole load of stuff that goes on in there, because if you read the lesson in there, Tom. She has a girl who hasn't done her homework and tells Jack at the beginning of the lesson, and she's expecting Jack to say, "Oh, that's okay, don't worry," and Jack doesn't. Jack says, "Well, you're in detention," and the girl then goes into a meltdown for the whole lesson, like head down, and Jack kind of jumps in with her, kind of comes to see her once or twice. And right at the end of the lesson, when you get to the heart of the lesson and the conclusion of it, which Jack's bring to it perfectly, the girl puts her hand up. And I'm thinking she's going to say, "Oh, can I go and see the head of year now?" And no, she's actually found the content irresistible and makes this brilliant, incisive comment right at the end of the lesson. And so Jack's got her into detention, been patient, not held the line, and made the teaching irresistible. It was just a brilliant moment. And so writing that took a lot of skill to not be unsympathetic with the student, but she did it brilliantly. And I'm glad she thought it was okay to keep it in the book, because it's those things that can get lost, those moments of magic that happen there.
But I think that's inspiring to me, because I feel like if I was a young teacher or a teacher wanting to improve, I'd be thinking, it's messy, it's complex, it's not some linear thing. Even these great teachers have these issues, it's real. And yet you keep pressing, going through and you get there. And that's what kids respect. They respect the fact that you're kind of mature, grown up, even-handed with behavior, but you have expectations and you make that come through a love and a care. And Jack clearly has achieved that. Like, they know her high standards are a kind of love, and that's really powerful. I'm thinking because of time, because I want to get into this a tiny bit, and I don't know, Emma, if you have the same, if these are the same. Are the lists at the end of your kind of the things that you draw out at the end the same in both books? Okay, so I'm going to list because at the end you sort of do your kind of like Tomsett principles, and I love just after you list them, you say, many readers will say that they could have listed these 9 behaviors of truly great teachers for me before I began my work, and saved me the days spent beetling around the country visiting schools. So it's quite disarming, which is nice, and maybe they could, but I'm going to read them out for people, okay? And
Okay,
I think,
shall I tell the story just a little bit if we've got time? Because I asked Alex quickly what research there was about student behaviours and teacher behaviours and attitudes and student progress. So there was, and he put me in touch with Barrett Rosenshine, who knew. But he did a study in 1971, a meta-analysis of exactly that, helped by Norma First, and he came up with 11 teacher behaviours and attitudes that seemed to result in good pupil progress, but deserve further research. And they're very clear: clarity of explanation, variability of pedagogy, enthusiasm, business-like behaviour, being like on it, student opportunity to learn the criteria material, using student ideas and general indirectness, criticism, delivering criticism well, use of structure and comments, types of questions, probing, level of difficulty of instruction. So I wanted to look at what I was seeing through that lens, really, and as a starting point. So it felt like a bit more than just me guessing about what I liked and being prejudiced about it. And in the end, I come up with my 9. And Tom, if you want to read them out, or I can read them out, you read them out.
yeah, I mean, this is great. It's almost like, you go to teacher training, they do well to read this out in the first lesson. Teach with enthusiasm. Like, who wants to be in a lesson where the teacher says, sorry, guys, this is going to be a bit boring, but we've got to get through it, Enthusiasm. Explain things with clarity. And that's easier said than done. Vary your pedagogic practices. Yeah, so diet, variety. But not just because to make it fun, but because you need to for technical learning reasons. Be organized and purposeful. So that sense of getting on, pushing on. I think that's great. Have genuinely high expectations. I love the genuine, because that means not just you say you have them, but they kind of are higher than others.
I just want to come in there, Tom, right? Because I've never heard a teacher or a head teacher or a school professor to have low to middling expectations. And yet, I can still go into classrooms and find kids doing 5 hours of low level admin tasks and filling in worksheets downloaded from Twinkle, right? So it's really hard to have genuine high expectations.
I know it's hard to perceive that your expectations are lower than others. It's a real issue. Some people just don't know it and about themselves. It's a hard thing. Check for understanding is clearly big. I mean, that's like Rosenshine #1. But have a confident understanding of the content. So the subject specialism coming through. Help individual pupils and build positive working relationships. I mean, that's it, and that's a kind of. And would you say all of the teachers that you met and talked to display all 9 of those?
Yeah, and I go, why not have a round 10th? My last controversial one is that every single one of them works hard
Mm.
for the pupils. That, and I think, and I say that right at the end, my 10th, if I never thought the level of reciprocity was so strong, but it is. And visibly put it in. And I was talking about this today because I've just come back from Manchester today, doing a day's walkthroughs training with Manchester College. And their experience of the children in that college is the same as my experience of working in white working class schools. The working class kids will test you out, and they'll test you out until they realize you're on their side, then they'll do anything for you. Right? If you're working hard for them and believe in them and put it in for them, they'll do anything for you. But if you don't, they won't. And that's exactly their experience. So there is something really important and maybe controversial about working hard, but putting a shift in is really, really key to getting the children to work hard too.
I really like the number 3 about that pedagogic practices, Tom and John. I feel like I want to make it flash, that kind of vary your pedagogic practices, because I do think there is a danger in the teach by numbers approach. Like every lesson must start with this and followed by that and done with this, and then teachers are not doing that in the moment, thinking about what would work best for this subject at this stage of the children's understanding, at this stage of development, at this point in the learning, when this number of children are getting it or not getting it. And I think that variation is not just, like you say, to just do some kind of scattergun Jackson Pollock, look how many things I can do, but genuine variety based on age, stage, subject, understanding, whereabouts in that unit of work you are, that there isn't necessarily a one size fits all. And that number 3 for me is absolutely key.
Oh, I think one you pick out, so you remember paragraphs you've written and lines you've written. So quite near the end, I say this because there's a brilliant interview with Michael Young, who wrote Future Schools, Social Justice Through a Knowledge-Rich Curriculum. And what he said in that interview back in September 22 is that we seem to have lost sight of engaging children and cajoling them into the learning communities. And I wrote this near the end of the book. Our education system is suffering post-COVID from low pupil attendance rates and poor pupil behaviour, and parents and children no longer live by the imperative that pupils must attend school. This is a world where university education is no longer a guarantee of meaningful employment, where the internet is seen all too often as the easy to access source of more knowledge. Is it possible, I'm asking you a question here, is it possible we've forgotten just how crucial it is to entice pupils into the learning process, that we no longer feel an obligation to encourage them to join our learning communities, that we can just give them a knowledge organizer, a glue stick, and 5 hours of low-level admin tasks and call that teaching, right? Because in my humblest opinion, something that might help solve both the teacher recruitment crisis and the children attendance crisis is to get back doing stuff with the passion that these teachers are doing it, right? And the variability, that teach by numbers bit, from on high, from centralized, 2 minutes you do this, 4 minutes you do that, 8 minutes you do that, which I've seen some horror stories of doing. A knowledge organizer and a glue stick is not enough, right? It's what you do with it, and that's what we talk about all the time.
You see, if I was going to add a 10th, would be understand why you're doing it. And I don't mean the big kind of Simon Sinek understand your why. But why are you doing that at that point in the lesson? Why have you given them this task? Why would you go and talk to that child at that point? It's not what you're doing necessarily. It's why you would do that at that point for that child within this subject at that point in the learning. So that kind of understand the why of the teaching. And that really shone out in that narration of the decision-making process that those great teachers in this book were doing. They could tell you why they were doing it at that point.
It's really interesting.
I think that a number of them mention, engagement with science of learning and research and so on, and that's part of it. There's a sort of one of the things I'm interested in. This is like for another whole thing. Is in a way it's sort of if you also looked at teachers who kind of leave teaching sooner and their practices and what's gone wrong in a way that's not encouraging compared to these teachers that are focused on here, is that they probably haven't been allowed to sort of flourish to develop those skills because it takes time. And the way these people have synthesized their subject knowledge, their capacity to work with children, and they've got this experience which has fueled their expertise, and it's sort of a positive circle, and that's what's happened. And to some extent, there's a bit of maverick eccentricity across the whole set, which is lovely, but that's been supported. I was going to say tolerated, that sounds negative, but sort of like allowed, and it's not rigid. And I feel like we got this blend of autonomy with evidence informed. We've got to get that right.
I think I think you're absolutely right, Tom. So when I've been doing work with the walkthroughs lately, in the past 6 months, and people can recall from it. It feels like we're teaching by numbers. You do that, and you do that, and you do that, you do that, you do that. What I say is if you become unconsciously competent at those core businesses, at those very core businesses of asking good questions, situational assessment, how to run a really good think, pair, share, all that kind of really incredibly basic pedagogic stuff, then you can do all the other stuff with deep enthusiasm because you know that stuff is absolutely nailed on. You're not thinking about your cognitive load isn't taken up. You're thinking, right, how do I ask that question? How do I ask that question? All your cognitive load is, right, I'm going to do this. I've got this going on. This is going to be great. I'm going to do this. This is the most exciting thing, kids, you'll ever do. Right.
Yeah.
And I know I said that last lesson and I'll say it tomorrow, but it's true. Right. And then you've got that energy to do that. But you have to work really hard on those skills. So my mate Tom, who I go fishing with, I taught for years at Lady Lumley's with. I told him about the first woman, Susie Marston, blah blah blah, and my project and how many people I've seen. And he said, I bet they were just left to get on with it. I said yes and no, right? Because they're really well trained.
Yeah.
So it's not just go and perform. They're really well trained. They understand how children learn. They're really good at all that stuff, but they've not lost any of their character and their love of what they're doing. And that's what I loved. It's a combination of both. It's not one or the other. No binary. It's the combination of really sharp practice plus just how much they love the job.
Well, can I end with how you ended? Because I feel we're going to have to wrap this up because you finished the book. And actually, it's a coincidence it's linked to Jack Bream, who I mentioned her earlier. But I'll end with Jack Bream, who, when I asked her if she had ever thought of doing anything else other than teach, she said, no, I just want to do teaching and that's all, that's it. And yes, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I've done 28 years and I still love my job. How many people can say that? And I just think, yeah.
Exactly.
But that's the message.
Exactly.
That's the message. Let's get Jack Bream on all the adverts. It's like, I love it. And I think, John, you've done it's a great thing that you've made here.
Thank you.
It's a celebration of teaching in a way which is very human and unique, I think. I don't think I've read anything like that. And I think people should read it, and all the teacher recruiting people should get copies of it and turn it into giant posters.
Oh. Lovely. Thank you so much. It's been great. I mean, I could chat about it all day, as you can tell. And I do feel it's some of the loveliest stuff I've done, right, in my career.
I hope people read it. And thanks again for joining us on Mind the Gap.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really kind.
Okay, well, look, thanks to all of you out there listening to Mind the Gap. I hope you're enjoying the new season. We've got so many great guests coming up, and it's been a great honour again to talk to John. And thanks for listening. And thank you, Emma, for joining us. I know you're back in the saddle after a tricky time, and you've just been fantastic.
Yeah. I had a summer where it didn't quite pan out exactly how I expected, but in fine fettle again and back at it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner and I've been presenting with my co-host John Hutchinson. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review, share on social media and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel by searching Mind the Gap with John and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership and our producer is Luke Kemper.